everybody, my name is Shortline K819. Oh, hello. Uh, there we go. I did all the preparations for the stream, only to forget to load up PNG Tuber Plus. Well, welcome back to another Strategic Stream Initiative stream. I need to do more of these, but I guess we'll see. But today, in the spirit of the SSI, we're not gonna be playing a game. I feel like the first few games were Vine Boom sound effect. Hello, Crimson. I feel like the first few streams were me not playing games, and then it just evolved into me playing games. But now we're back. The fourth day of the semester. I've started doing more work, so that's nice. That feels good. But today we're going to be working on a little bit of a world building project of mine, which is, of course, my fictional railroad, which is the Washington, Ohio. Or specifically Washington, Ohio Pacific, because alternate universeisms. I got a map up, a very incomplete map. I got a Trainiacs thing. Let me actually load up something real quick. Let me actually load up another file explorer so I can just drag all my files over into here when I need them. Where is WNO version 4? You know, let's get this up too. Because why not? But yeah, I guess today the goal is to complete this is a Trainiac thing one of my Discord, one of the persons in my Discord did, random. And then here's a Trainiac thing that I'm working on. We got the Washington, Ohio. I guess I got to luckily most of this is just done. So hold up. I'm trying to figure out how exactly I want to go about configuring everything. There we go. But yeah, I got this. This is a map of the Washington, Ohio. Still very much work in progress. Well, technically Washington, Ohio Pacific, circa 1980, which is when I'm setting this in. Lots of alternate history going on here. Long story short, all you need to know is that this railroad leans heavily into electric mode of power. And I got myself a Trainiacs E60CH here that I need to work on. So let's go ahead. Let's get up a picture real quick of an actual E60CH. Because I want to see where are the logos on this thing. Or E60CP technically is what I have here. Because it's the only Trainiacs thing I have available. Hello Gam, welcome in. How is Boston? That's a cool scheme, Navajo Mine Railroad. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the center of this, so I know where exactly to put the logo. Now this is a passenger version of an E60. This is the Amtrak dual cab versions, which I can't find a non-Amtrak version of this, or where it just has the one cab, I guess you could say, the one piece. But here we go. But I can wave this away by saying, finally hitting back in the Night Owl. Boston was amazing. Also, be better if I get compensated. Lol, nice. I can say because in 1980, obviously Amtrak is a thing by this point, so there would be, and the Washington, Ohio gives their passenger trains over to Amtrak. So, however, in the Northern Virginia area, which is, this wonderful location over here, um, they still operate the commuter services. Those haven't been handed over to a state agency yet, and this is all electric. So I'm thinking maybe they buy these for because they go with the passenger version, the dual cab passenger version, because they need some to handle all the regional trains, the commuter trains that they're still running over here. And they can also handle all of the other freight things. It really doesn't matter if it has a cab on one end. So let me go ahead and actually bring in the logo. Let's bring that in. This is set in 1980, where there is a alternate series of mergers throughout the 1970s, which result in a couple of transcontinental rail systems. So the Washington, Ohio needs to respond to that, of course, so they end up buying the Milwaukee Road. Well, most of the Milwaukee Road. I'll get to that in a... I'm still gonna map some of this out, but I've mapped out most of the major lines. I'm sort of working my way west from here, so this area, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, that's basically all done. But I did want to get a locomotive done, so... let's see. I mean, that's pretty big on there. Okay. Need the logo. Nope. Okay, there we are. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then from top right there is 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, 9. Let me actually go ahead, drag this out right here for a moment. Yeah, how was everyone's day? As I said, it was the fourth day of the semester for me. I had my accounting class today. And the accounting class, I feel like, is gonna be, like, I always knew it was gonna be hard. But, like, oh my gosh, that class. My professor talks at a speed that I can only describe as 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so it's one of those classes where I feel like I'm gonna learn the most by reading the textbook, which means I have to read the textbook, which is pretty beefy. 2, 3, 4, 5, yes. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the textbook is pretty intense, as they say. Which is like the forward on the locomotive? I just look up an E60 real quick. Well, that's the forward right that way. Okay. We can do a little bit of like a special scheme on these, because this is supposed to be like the Washington, Ohio's like premier power circa the early 80s. So maybe just, send that forward, white stripe. It also delineates Which side of the locomotive is front? Well, I guess it also is sort of on the other way, too. I don't know, because then I just realized I'd have to do it on the other side, too. I mean, we can experiment with schemes. There's no harm in doing that. So yeah, I do think this semester is going to be easier than the last, but that's still a judgment I don't think I'm going to be able to make until the end of the week. But if that is the case, I do have other things to, school-related things to occupy my time, so it's not, like, too big of a deal. Do we like that white stripe? I don't know. Maybe that can be like some bizarre experimental scheme. It's not on this locomotive. The tunnel motors. Yeah, I don't know if I like that really. We'll just leave that as is for now. What other information? Let's see. That's another thing, like, roster. I did start work on a roster. Hold up, okay. Over here. Branda, bold, I don't know why it's yellow colored. Washington and Ohio. Typically it's near the rear of the locomotive where it says the name. Because if you look at this, I put it above. Maybe leave it right there. Because, you know, that's the front right there, so... You know, and I do have to make several versions, so like Washington, Ohio, Milwaukee Road, Hung River Railroad, which is, up... So there's two electric divisions on the railroad, right? There's the Eastern Electric Division, which is the original Washington, Ohio one from... I think they started electrifying this in the canon in, like, 1910. This line that I'm tracing with my cursor from Point Pleasant out to Washington, D.C. And then they later electrified the secondary line, that's Gore, West Virginia right there. Through Keyser, West Virginia, down through Elkins and Charleston. That was like a second mainline strategy that they were pursuing in the 20s. They electrified that along with some of the lines up here. Mostly this one down to Manassas and, like, I think this is like Gainesville over here. And this little belt line around, which is this is actually supposed to be the Shepherd Industrial Spur, if anyone's familiar with that line. It's where the DC streetcar was supposed to run. And then later on in, like, the 70s, when the oil crisis hit, they ended up... The Loudon branch, which is this line right here, that electrification was paid for by the state, and then the Washington, Ohio did this, including down to here by themselves, because right here is... I was looking at maritime charts, and this is how deep in the weeds I get with this. I was looking at maritime charts, and here it showed that this part of the Potomac is actually relatively deep water, It's only once you get up into the Potomac, into the Alexandria area, where it becomes particularly shallow. I'm like, okay, maybe in like the 1880s, 1890s, because this area is close to the mouth of the Chesapeake, it's, it's a deep water area, they build like a big port over here. So this is Port Washington. It's supposed to be a in this area, like a port the size of kind of like what Newport News was to the Chesapeake in Ohio. So kind of like their own dedicated port. And then these lines up here to the Great Lakes were also an 80s electrification edition. That time where there was a second railroad bridge over the Potomac. Yes, actually, because if we look up Rail Guide, so the way I'm sort of approaching this, right? Is the way the Washington, Ohio, I've sort of laid down my ground rules, is that most of the lines are either real railroads that were actually built, but I'm changing the histories around in like the 1800s, early 1900s or so. So instead of ending up as a part of, I don't know, the New York Central or the Southern Railway, they end up as a part of the W&O. Or proposed railroad lines that were just never built. The Washington, Ohio itself was a proposed railroad line that was, did technically exist for a few years, but they never built much. So the original line from Alexandria out through central West Virginia, that was a proposed line that I did a bunch of research into and decided to make the basis of my fictional railroad. There's very few lines on here that are entirely of like my own creation. Like this line to Cincinnati, that's of my own creation. I know the Norfolk and Western did build part of it, but their intention was never to build along the river. There's a couple of branches out this way that are entirely fictional. This entire Port Washington thing, that's entirely fictional. But yes, they do build the bridge. So during World War II, there was a temporary bridge across the Potomac River in Alexandria. So you have this southern, what's marked as the Southern Railway, but was the Washington Dominion at the time. W&OD was leasing this line from the Southern. Came down through here into Alexandria, and then right over here, they built a temporary bridge across the river, and that connected with the Shepherd Industrial Spur, which goes up through Anacostia, and eventually ties in with the Pennsylvania Railroad Main, and of course the rest of the Baltimore and Ohio up at Hyattsville. So, the reason why the B&O built this, the B&O built this in the 1870s, I believe. And at the time, they would go down here, where the treatment plant is today, and they would ferry cars across the river. And the reason why they did that is because of this bridge right here, the long bridge across the Potomac River. Because at the time, the Pennsylvania Railroad had managed to get exclusive access to use this bridge. They basically blocked the B&O from using this bridge. So if the B&O wanted connections south, they had to go down here and float cars across the river to Alexandria to head further south. Now that was especially important at the time because many people don't know this, but the Baltimore and Ohio actually tried to expand southward into Virginia post-Civil War. This line out here, from Alexandria through Culpeper, down through Orange, and Lynchburg, that was originally the Orange and Alexandria, and then the line from Manassas out to Harrisonburg was the Manassas Gap. The B&O actually, in I think 1874, they bought these two railroads and consolidated them into the Virginia Midland. It was a B&O subsidiary. So if they wanted to connect with the rest of their lines over here, that was the only way they could do it. Eventually, the B&O lost control of these lines to the southern, first to the Richmond and Danville, which became the Southern in 1894. The alternate history of the Washington, Ohio is the Alexandria, Loudon, and Hampshire, which originally planned to build from Alexandria west to Keyser, West Virginia. They got started in our history. They got started in 1855. In this history, they get started about a couple of years earlier in 1847. So it's a lot earlier of a line. Now, the Alexandria Loud Hampshire did end up building out to Hamilton, I believe, or Leesburg, and then the Civil War happened and the project got disrupted and eventually became the Washington Dominion. But with the head start they have in this timeline, they actually build most of the way out to Keyser by the time the Civil War begins. And then the Civil War happens, the railroads get destroyed. And then in the immediate aftermath, you have basically a three-way merger between the Alexandria Loudon Hampshire, the Manassas Gap, and the Orange and Alexandria. And that effectively blocks the B&O from going south, and that forms the Washington, Ohio, and that provides them with the network and the money that they need to actually do what they failed to do in our history, which was actually, reach the Ohio River. So that's why some of these lines, like this line was a part of the Southern, that's why this is part of the Washington and Ohio. I guess in this timeline, the Southern does still reach Richmond via the original Richmond and Danville, but I sort of thought that, the Southern might have, like, trackage rights up through here, so it's still, you'll still see Southern Railway trains on that. But yes, I know this is a very roundabout answer, but long story short, because the B&O is effectively blocked from extending south, they don't have any reason to build this like they did in our timeline, in our history. So that eventually leads to the Washington, Ohio, when the Pennsylvania Railroad got their exclusive right to use this bridge. Well, they still want to build north, they still want to connect with the B&O, so that's when they go and build the Loudon branch. They do two things. They build the Loudon branch up to Harper's Ferry, which was another proposed line of the Manassas Gap. And then they go ahead, they're like, that kind of works, but not really too well. But they end up building this, and they connect up with the B&O and the PRR on this side. And that becomes, in the Washington, Ohio universe, this is known as the Washington Belt Line, basically, because, it basically just goes around downtown DC. So that's what that is, that's what that is. And it is electric, because, if the W&O electrifies their main, well, they might as well connect it up to the other electric railroad that's in the region. So they also obviously electrify it up through Potomac Yard, but I'm thinking that most of the freights, if they're just bypassing Potomac Yard, they go up through here and then head north on the PRR. But if they need to use Potomac Yard, they obviously, use Potomac Yard, which is just right here. So that's my very long and in-depth explanation of that right there. I should probably get back to Where We Once Belonged, as the Beatles once sung, and focus on actually, finishing this. I was also going to mention the Tongue River Railroad, which was a proposed coal line in the 1980s, which was out here. Burlington Northern wanted to build this, but it kept getting blocked and blocked and blocked, and I mean, the latest attempt at building it was like 15 years ago, and at that point, people just threw up their hands and said, yeah, we're not going to build this. But in this timeline, they build it, because, there's coal over here. You might as well, it's like, for a fictional railroad, you gotta find whatever market you can. And a lot of that, heads west and heads east. So. Okay. I've been pinged on Discord. I would also probably zoom into this. Hello? Oh, there we go. Let's lock in and finish this. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. There we go. Washington, Ohio. Now what else? Well, there is the numbers, of course. So let me look at an actual E60 real quick. There's Rail Guide. That's where Amtrak put the numbers. I don't really like that. I find that kind of stupid. So I think I'm gonna put the numbers like right here. Now I do have... Hold up. I do have a roster. Unfortunately... Spreadsheets. It is very, 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 very bare bones, as in I don't even have I don't even have any of the like locomotive numbers. So I did have an idea that like electrics would be in the like electrics would be given, you know, 3-digit numbers, while diesels would be given 4-digit numbers. So I guess we can just go down the list. I mean, like, how many electrics do you think that this would require? Probably a lot. I'm unfortunately not the best judge of railroad rosters. I don't really make these, but I kind of have to. Oh, my sister made steak. I know people who are far better at making rosters than I can. But let's just EL E25B. I forget what this is. Oh, that's the that's one of these things. 300, 400, 500, 600. I mean, okay, if we look up N Central roster, like 1976 or something, right? Or Conrail, that works too. If we just look up how many, like... Okay, E44, this is the Conrail roster, and the Conrail roster is like, I don't know, the Conrail electrification is maybe what, like 1/4 of this. So... Six, okay. I can just look up E44 locomotive. So 66 of these were made. And then GG1 locomotives? How many GG1s were made? 139. Okay. So... And then, like, E33s, right? All of those ended up going to the... Only 12. Okay. So, the GM10Bs, those are, like, the new thing. So, I might do 100 to, like... Let me get up a calculator on my phone. This is just incredibly rough math. Let's see. Okay, so 100 to 300, which they're not going to use 300 of these. Like 100 to 200, right? This is like the 1980 renumbering of everything. Okay, so 200 plus so 100, or let's do 101. Okay, 100 to 200. And then 201 to 301. And these are just temporary. I don't think that they're gonna have, I don't think that they're gonna have, 100 GM10Bs or whatever. It's just like, that's the number slots, right? E25Bs, I suspect that they might have a lot of those. So 302. 302 to 502. That's why, let's just temporarily put 100 for now, because that's like 200 of those, right? E60s? How many E60s were made? E60 electric. GE60, let's see. 73, only 73 E60s were made. Okay. E60s were very successful in the coal hauling role. Okay, yeah. So 503. So if I remember correctly, the GM 6Cs were more like, the GM 10Bs were more like like fast freight service. So 05 plus 703. And then the E44s, like, I can't imagine that they're sort of phasing out the E44s, so. And I'll determine this more at some point. So 704 to, how many E30? 66. Okay. Yeah, let's just say that they got like 100 of these. Actually, let's just say they have 50, right? At this point. Because by this point in 1980, the E33s were implemented when, right? 1960 to 1963, they would be like 20 years old at that point, so they'd probably retire some. Or no, maybe they keep some around. The E33s were, yeah, those were like 1959, I think. So 805, 850, 855. Yeah, and then I'll just make like a comment here saying very rough numbers. Okay. Or actually, hold up. Let me go ahead, do that, and then very rough numbers. Okay, there we go. And then of course I have like all the diesels, so okay, so at this point, I'm just gonna get rid of that for now. These locomotives do look nice, though. I do like these. Unfortunately, I could only find... Unfortunately, I could only find the E60 CH passenger version. Okay, so what number did I give these things? 503... Or 503. Or no, 503. That's fairly sizable, right? Because like that font is fairly big. Yeah, something like that might be too big. 15. Yeah, 503 right there, and then it'll be like E60CH or whatever underneath. Okay. Let me actually drag that away real quick. I'm not the most advanced Trainiacs user in the world, so there are people at this who are far, far better than I will ever be. But let's go ahead. That's the center line right there. And then what's the lore behind this? Hello, Fig Pudding. I am working on a fictional railroad of mine because if you don't know, I have intense vehicle autism. So I must make fictional versions of things that either existed or never existed. But this is my fictional railroad. It's the Washington, Ohio. It is set in 1980. And it's basically in an alternate universe where this one proposed rail line that never got built ends up getting built. And I'm primarily basing everything in the 1970s because that's the era of railroading I find the most fascinating, and I can also play around a lot with like alternate mergers and fun stuff like that because that's what my brain is attached to. But I am currently working on a Trainiacs. This is a Trainiacs thing. Basically, it's a bunch of templates that you can use to make like paint locomotives and up with. I'm working on an electric locomotive because my railroad leans heavily into electric locomotives. So all the lines in blue are ones that use electric locomotives, and then orange is just, you know, diesel and whatnot. So everyone else is still keeling over and merging. It's an alternate merger scenario, yes. I mean, if you really want to be technical, it's an alternate merger scenario that's going back to like 1845 in certain cases, because most of the Washington, Ohio lines are either real railroads with ownership changes in the early 1800s, or proposed railroads that never got built. There's a few lines here that I did just make up out of nowhere, but because I find that period of railroading with, you know, the merger era, I guess if you want to say that, the reason why I find that so fascinating, I kind of wanted to like play around with that specifically in the 70s because I think there's a lot you can do. But this is an alternate timeline where most of the mergers are different. And long story short, the primary aspect is that in the late 1970s, there are two primary aspects. First, you get transcontinental mergers. So like Southern Pacific buys Family Lines, and Burlington Northern merges with the Illinois Central Gulf and the Southern, and Santa Fe buys the Norfolk and Western, stuff like that. Union Pacific and Chesapeake System, stuff like that. And of course, the Washington, Ohio, being this relatively small coal hauler in the eastern United States, has to respond to that. So they partner up with the Milwaukee, which is in a better position because, you know, it's a rare alternate history timeline. The Milwaukee always has to do better. and they formed the Washington Ohio Pacific, which is a stupid name, and that's exactly the point. Because, I want to keep my branding, so just slap Pacific onto it. We reach the Pacific, we go to Tacoma now. There's also some other aspects to it, too. Penn Central still happens because I like Penn Central. It's one of my favorite railroads. But Conrail is a bit different, where Conrail is basically confined to, like, the farthest west Conrail goes is, like, Buffalo and Pittsburgh. And everything west of that, into the Midwest, is just given to other railroads. So Conrail only really exists up in, like, this area. Which was one of the actual proposals for it. It was a proposal that didn't go through, but is one that I found a bit interesting. So the Washington, Ohio buys some lines over here. They get the former PRR main. And, there is stuff like, other railroads come in and grab some things. So, like, Southern Pacific gets a lot of this. Which sounds cursed, and it is, but actual proposal, might as well use it. Passenger service still gets ceded to Amtrak. I want to say that passenger service is generally better in this timeline. Mostly because one of my big gripes with Amtrak is that it never has a consistent source of funding. So under this timeline, instead of being like a government-owned corporation, Amtrak is a part of the Department of Transportation, much like the highway system. So because of that, it actually gets consistent funding in the same way that, like, a highway would, and that enables them to do a lot more. It also helps that because my railroad leans heavily into electric power, a lot of these lines have Amtrak routes on them. Like, I'm thinking, if you want, the Amtrak runs like a regional service, throughout West Virginia that uses electrics and whatnot. And a lot of these lines in Northern Virginia, these have commuter trains on them and stuff like that. So you have these lines which are more northern, like these lines up here are more commuter, and then or passenger focused, and then all the freights just kind of go on this big bypass around DC. So stuff like that. To be fair, I haven't really fleshed out much of the Amtrak portion. I'm mainly focusing on getting this map done. Two things. I'm focused on getting this map done. And then I'm focused on getting some of this, like, some of the Trainiac stuff up. Just so I can, like, show it's not just a map. It's like, oh, it's a locomotive you can look at. Here's another locomotive that one of my Discord people on my Discord made for me. So, okay. Let's continue with this. Let's try and get this done, and then we can work more on the map. So yeah. Now, this is technically the fourth version of the Washington, Ohio that I've made. This railroad, I first conceived of this idea while goofing off in my German class in, like, 9th grade, where I happened upon an old Library of Congress map that had the actual proposal for the Washington, Ohio. And I'm like, ooh, I can make a fictional railroad out of that. So I did, and I made one really terrible version, another really terrible version, a third decent-ish version, and now I'm on the fourth one, which is completely different from the rest, mostly. So, not entirely, though. There's a lot of continuity, mostly involving a lot of the stuff over here, but, let's see. So, oop. And now, let's see. So this is an E60 stage. Real quick, E60 stage. What's the difference? I probably should know this. 60 stage. E60CH had steam generators. E60CH had HEP generators. I see. Yeah, these are the Amtrak ones. They ended up on Navajo Mine Railroad, and New Jersey Transit. Okay. So I can't find another electric for use in Trainiac, so I'm just kind of stuck with this one. I guess I'm mapping out an Amtrak one, so 503 E60H. Yeah, there we go. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do they get any of the XPR PC GG1s? No, the WNO doesn't get any GG1s. Conrail is going to need all the GG1s that they can get because they actually go ahead with their plan to electrify between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. So my basic idea is that the oil crisis in the 70s is like much worse. Like half of the Middle East is now communist and the US can't get the oil. So that's what sort of drives higher sustained oil prices is what drives more railroads to actually electrify. Which, I mean, a lot of railroads were really close to doing it, and then 1980 hit, and you had the big oil glut, and that's what caused them to not do it. But that also helps with well, some other aspects that are more spaceflight based, which are completely, not. I mean, I could get into that, but I don't feel like it. Let's see. 503. Actually, hold up. Let me shift that down some more. Right? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there we go. That's a little measurement stick that I have. And then I assume I can just like. I mean, these have to be the same dimensions. It's just the locomotive just flipped. We'll see. Okay. Now, the WNO does use the same electrification system as the PRR. It's standardized. The two do connect with one another in the Washington, D.C. area. So you would probably see, like, through trains. It wouldn't be that rare to see, like, a GG1, like a Conrail GG1 or something, heading up a Washington, Ohio train somewhere. So... Actually, here's a question. Let me go to this tunnel motor. Real quick. Let me... Are these the same? I think these locomotives are the same resolution, right? Yeah, I think they are. Okay, that needs to be bigger then. Is that the same? Am I going insane? Yeah, I think that's the same size. Okay, so this needs to be bigger then. Yeah, that needs to be far bigger. What size is this? Uh, like 20? No. Like 15, right? That's like 18? That's 18 point font. Okay. Yeah, in that case, that needs to be bigger. Yeah, if you're wondering, like the beginning of the Conrail electrification is like here. It's in Potomac Yard. So this is their electrification up here, and there is a like a little bypass line around DC, which kind of helps connect it to. The reason there's a gap right here is that this is some trackage rights out here. That's for the commuter trains going into Union Station. All the freight just kind of goes around the city, but there's no reason for them to, you know, be on this brief little section right here, so they don't have rights over it. Let's see. I'm legally obligated to show this now, aren't I? Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure the person who sent this to me is very proud of that fact. Anyways, okay. I keep saying I'm gonna lock in, but then I don't. Let's see. Okay, let's go 3. Hit me. Oh. Oh, I didn't know. Okay. Shit, I didn't know that was you. I just. Hello, welcome. Okay. Let's see. Let me go ahead and... Shit, I have to redo this whole thing now. Let me go ahead and redo that whole thing. But yeah, this of course is in... the reason why I sort of chose a railroad in this region is... Well, because I used to live in Northern Virginia next to the Washington Dominion Railroad, which... I mean, so I was always sort of interested in, you know, what if that railroad was more successful? So I did a bunch of research on it and said, oh yeah, one of the predecessors wanted to build out to the Ohio River. And I'm like, okay, they never did. And it's like, okay, that's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe I can make something out of that. And yeah. A 503, okay. Hatsune Miku. One, two, three, four, five. Yeah, and now... What size font is this? SD45T-2, my beloved. E60CH. I guess my sort of justification for the Washington, Ohio, which is primarily a freight railroad having passenger versions of this diesel, is that in 1980, I think I already said this, but in 1980, all the passenger trains, like the intercity passenger trains, been handed over to Amtrak, but the commuter services, and this is the case in real life too, the commuter services in and around cities were still being operated by their respective railroads. Like at the time, Conrail was the biggest. Conrail was still operating all the commuter trains in and around New York City and Philadelphia, and I think Boston had been spun off into its own thing by that point, but it was only until 1983, the early 80s, 1983, I think the Northeastern Rails Passenger Services Act, I think, is when it's like, okay, the freight railroads no longer have to operate commuter trains. You have to form government agencies to do this now. So it would only be a matter of time before the Washington, Ohio commuter trains are just transferred to WMATA or something. But they bought these E60s so they can do like both commuter and passenger trains. Okay. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Amtrak gets some, who knows. The good thing is that this is basically almost done. The background. Yeah, there we go. I do want to say maybe they get like... I do eventually want to make another version, which is just DC Metro North. Game, we would love this universe, because, like, the Washington, Ohio headquartered in Alexandria. So, Washington, Ohio is a product, despite, having Washington on the name, like Washington, D.C. The main headquarters in Alexandria. Potomac Yard is a pretty big yard for the W&O, just like it was in real life. The headquarters are in Alexandria because all three of the railroads that came together in, 1870 to form it were Alexandria-based. I haven't gotten too much into this, but I'm thinking that there are a couple of, regional rail lines that start in Washington, D.C. and Alexandria, and one of them heads out along this main line out to Winchester. Another heads south to Warrington. You have another south one goes to Gainesville out here, and then you have the Loudon branch, which goes out to Harper's Ferry. And then there's trains to and from Dulles Airport to Union Station and whatnot. And then I was also thinking that, Amtrak might run services down here to Port Washington, and they also maybe have a service or two using the electrics out to out through central West Virginia. Because early Amtrak had, frankly, a ridiculous number of services. I'm not saying it's bad, of course, but a lot of services that just served West Virginia, and that's because Early Staggers was the head of the House Subcommittee on Transportation. He was the guy who basically controlled Amtrak's budget. And he was basically the guy who controlled Amtrak's budget, and he basically told them, if you don't have a bunch of West Virginia trains, because he was senator from West Virginia, then I'm not giving you money. So basically, Amtrak had a bunch of West Virginia trains early on just to appease Senator Staggers, and then the moment he left, the moment he retired, half of them just disappeared. So the amount of times I'd go to Winchester in this timeline. Well, Winchester would be a pretty great place to be in this timeline, because that's actually where the Washington, Ohio's major shops are. They have a big hump yard in Winchester, because it's at the confluence of a lot of lines. Because anything coming east, right? They split it in Winchester. A lot of it goes to Potomac Yard, a lot of it goes down south, and then a lot of it also heads north through to Hagerstown, which this Hagerstown line that's former Pennsylvania Railroad. It's now the Winchester and Western in real life, but that would be recently bought. I've also incorporated a tourist railroad into here. This is the Shenandoah Scenic Railway, and this is basically, so the original route across this mountain would go north of Leesburg, cross through Vestal Gap, which is in northern Loudoun County, drop down south along the Potomac River, and then meet up over here and then head west to Winchester. So that was the original line, how they got over this mountains. But later on, they built the Bluemont Cutoff, which is basically they build out to basically between to Bluemont, where the WNOD went in real life, and then they build a massive, like, 4-mile long tunnel underneath the Blue Ridge, and that basically just makes us redundant. But this little branch becomes a tourist railroad that you can take an electric passenger rail service out to ride a steam locomotive, because I have to indulge myself. So Washington and Ohio. So it's kinda based, not gonna lie. So yeah, the general vibe I'm going for with this is this supposed to be the most realistic timeline in the world? The answer to that is a pretty solid no. However, I want someone to be able to look at everything that I've done, right, with this. And if I do my job right, and I properly explain it all out, I want someone to be able to take a look at it and say, yeah, it might not be the most, like, strict realism sort of thing in the world, but I can see how that could happen, right? Because, and I sort of adopt that philosophy when it comes to, like, these kinds of, what-if projects, because here's the thing, reality, our perceptions of reality and our perceptions of what are realistic and what aren't are limited by our perceptions of what are realistic, of what are logical, right? They're limited. What actually happens in real life, though, is completely random. I guess the better way to say this is that fiction has to obey the laws of, whatever laws of reality or laws of logic we think of, while actual reality doesn't. So, like, yeah, is it a bit, fantastical? Yeah, but so is reality itself, right? Stranger things have happened. Yeah, exactly. I actually like the smaller font on the... Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep the smaller font. Or actually, should we place it down there? Should we place it in line with this, with the transportation company right there? I think that would probably end up working better. Let me go ahead and do that, actually. We'll get that done, and then the only thing that we would have left would be the, like, the number boards, but that'll take, like, 5 seconds. So, let me go ahead. Let's see. Yeah, okay, there we go. Let's see. Washington and Ohio. I guess I also do have to make, like, Milwaukee Road versions because, it's the Milwaukee, well, because, they get these two. I don't know how many the Milwaukee specifically would get, because, I mean, I want to say that all, like, the newer power gets put on the Tongue River coal trains up through here. Oh, that's my desktop. Hey kids, you want to see an update on my V-Trooper model? There you go. We are rapidly becoming real as we speak. Okay, let's see. I do need to figure out what the roster for the tourist railroad is gonna be. That'll probably be easier than making like an actual roster for the railroad. I don't know. I've never gotten as far in my various fictional railroad endeavors to make like an actual make like an actual roster. So I just know I want these locomotives, and previously I just said I want these locomotives. I'm just gonna slap random numbers on them basically, and yeah. So Western Ohio. Okay. That's aligned right there. Yeah, that's better. Let me go ahead and actually consolidate. I have like 5 layers right here. That's the color layer. Let me actually name these. Color, logo. Yeah, background. Okay. Color, logo, locomotive. How about a Southern Pacific livery, just because? You laugh. Hold up. Do I have it on this computer? Hold up, give me a second. Because I do actually have the paint scheme. Nope, I don't want SP. If I just do I even have it on here? Yeah, I do actually have the paint scheme of well, I also have the St. Louis Southwestern one. This is the paint scheme that Southern Pacific adopts in this timeline. This is an actual scheme that they painted up a locomotive in this, and they promptly never rolled it out of the shop, but I think this was pretty cool. So this is the livery of the Southern Pacific Cotton Belt system. I'd really like to make one of these in HO scale. That would be so cool. I made this during Anime Club. Last semester, I think? Or was it the semester before? I don't know. I distinctively remember making this while, what were we watching? Big, you were there. It was the anime about the girl who can't speak. It's like a romance that was on. I don't remember, but okay. So the good thing is with this logo color, we're not worthy. I don't know. I don't know. Eventually, I do want to do maps of other railroads, but I don't know. The maps take a bajillion years to make. So here, let me add a new layer, and then you can't read that, but it's flat. Wait a second. Yeah, there we go. Let me scroll over. I'm going for an hour. It took me an hour to make this. Well, okay, to be fair, half of the stream has just been me rambling. So, there we go. Okay. I don't think I've screwed anything else up, but that is the Washington, Ohio Um, E60CH. Should I add anything which designates that this is like a commuter locomotive? Like it can be used on passenger trains. I do want to make a version of this in the passenger scheme. Okay, so this is the freight railroad scheme, by the way. This would be adopted in like 1973, I want to say. Prime Skylab years. Let's go, and I do have a passenger scheme that I dreamt up a bajillion years ago. This was my first attempt at something Trainiacs. This is maybe like 4 years old. But this is the scheme for the passenger locomotives. The commuter services don't get any fancy scheme. Because, you know, even though these are used on commuter trains, they're also used on freight trains, and you might as well just paint it up in like the freight scheme because they're going to do that. But this is like the 1950s, 40s, 50s passenger scheme. So I'm thinking, you know, one of these might haul the business train. It might be painted up in that special scheme. So, let's see. Here's an E60. That's at the Railroad Museum in Pennsylvania. You know what? I think that's okay for now. Let me go ahead and number boards. Is there anything else I need to do with this? Let's see. Oh yes, I probably, let me select those, that color. I probably need to make the headlights correct. Yeah, like that. Oop. Anything else? No, not really. I think that's done. That's 503, right? That's the flagship. Yeah, 503 to 703. I'll probably make a version for the Milwaukee, and I'll probably make a version for the Tongue River. Because, for those who don't know, the Washington Ohio Pacific is like a holding company, right? Despite this, even though this is treated, it's like chassis system, right? Where chassis system, you had the brand, the chassis system branding on all the locomotives, but they were either marked B&O, C&O, or WM, or Baltimore, Ohio, Chesapeake, Ohio, Western Maryland. And technically, those railroads remain separate, just subsidiaries of chassis system, even though for all intents and purposes operated one thing. Similar situation. So you would have, I guess, 4 railroads, technically. You'd have the Washington, Ohio, which is mostly over here. You'd have the Potomac in Ohio, which is like... the Potomac in Ohio would be... This is kind of a... kind of like, you know... I guess the easiest way to say it is that if the Washington, Ohio, and this is the Baltimore, Ohio, the Potomac, Ohio is the Western Maryland, if you know the relationship between those two railroads. But the Potomac and Ohio would be, let me just get up something to highlight it. The Potomac and Ohio would be like this. They would have trackage rights along the Port Washington line, and then they would have a line that goes west through the Blue Ridge, and then across the Shenandoah, and then into West Virginia, go up here, up to Elkins, and then they would have a line that sort of goes and just sort of dead ends in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, and they never reach the Ohio River, because, spoiler alert, this route is utterly torturous. But like the W&O buys that in 1960, mostly for some of their coal mines over here, and to eliminate a competitor, and most of the Potomac and Ohio, by 1980, most of the Potomac and Ohio is either like A lot of it's out of service. So like the dashed lines, if there's a dash line, that's a line that's still in place, but it's out of service. I don't know, maybe there's an alternate version of like Cass Scenic that runs this, who knows. And mostly what remains are mostly just a bunch of like coal mines over here and then stub end branches. And then this line was abandoned because there's literally no customers except near Fredericksburg. But yeah. I was also doing some research, right? Because I consult a lot of sources when I make my fictionals. I look at a lot of maps. Railguide is really nice. Google Maps, Multimodal Ways, which has a lot of old railroad maps and whatnot. A couple of books, stuff like that. And I was looking on Google Maps. Now let me bring up Google Maps on my separate screen where I actually have EJ's stream up. Spoiler alert, I've been watching a stream the whole time. Me watching EJ watching SpaceX fire a Raptor engine out at McGregor. Okay, well. Go watch EJ, he's a good streamer. He's my main inspiration. But, I was doing some reading, because this line right over here, this line, west from Orange, Virginia, or I can just get this up on Railguide. Give me a second. Yeah, Railguide is probably better. Just so I can show you the lines. There's Boston. Hey, Gam, you were just there. So, like, this line west from Fredericksburg, this was the Potomac, Fredericksburg, and Piedmont, which was a line that was started to lay down before the Civil War, and originally started as a standard gauge line, but it had no money and barely built any track, and then it became a narrow gauge line, and then they converted it back to standard gauge later, and then it was just abandoned. This is like the Potomac and Ohio line between Orange and Fredericksburg, which there's a little bit of a stub end right here to serve some industries, which is basically what happened with that line historically. But west of Orange through Ruckersville up through roughly along where Route 33 goes, and then down into the Shenandoah Valley, that was a proposed line called the Shenandoah Valley in Ohio. Never got built. And then you have the Chesapeake Western, which is a little short line over here. And the predecessor of the Chesapeake Western planned to build through Highland County, Virginia, out to the coal mines out here. Past Old Saybrook, yippee! And then Potomac, Ohio was also another proposal that basically planned to do something similar. That's another map that I found on Library of Congress, but it's so, like, poor quality, I can't really make out a route. So, where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So, like, I was consulting in order to get, like, determine what lines would likely be out of service and what lines would likely be in service. I looked at, like, maps of... Because Chesapeake Western eventually became part of the Norfolk and Western and later Norfolk Southern. So I looked at maps from the early 80s and saw, okay, so this line over here was still in service. And then, okay, if they built across the Blue Ridge into Orange, would any of this still be in service? And I found near Ruckersville, home of Chris Chan, I don't know where it is exactly, but there's... Oh, here it is. There's like a quarry here. So I'm like, okay, maybe they keep this little section open to serve the quarry. So... That's kind of the level of detail I generally go into on this kind of stuff. Because, you know... Hey, why not? It's cool. Okay. Canvas size. Let me reduce this down to... Oh, nope. Actually, hold up. Let me save this real quick. Let me save it as parentheses real. And then... If I... go back... and open that, that is... 1155 by... Excuse me, by what? 355? 355, and then... Yep, there we go. Let's go ahead and save this. Let's just save it as WNO E60CH. And there we go, we have a WNO electric. Let me go ahead and let me go ahead and save like a PNG of it. There we go. And I'm going to let me go ahead and just throw that in my fictional railroad chat real quick. Let's see. That's the PDN. Oh wait, hold up. 60CH. There we go. Yay, it's real. It only took me an hour and 20 minutes to finish something I should have finished in like 5 minutes, but it's because I was yapping the whole time. Let's the... Hold up, let me... Wait, no, Discord just has a forwarding feature. I don't even need this anymore. Okay, save. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've already saved it. Huh? August 19th, 2025. Wait, hold up. Chesapeake Bay. Oh yeah, the Chesapeake Bay. Albany Bay, yes. Chesapeake Bay. Explosion? Yeah, my friend Ryan lives on the Chesapeake Bay, and he walked outside to look at the bay, to admire the bay, and saw a ship that was just run aground, and apparently this is it. So, let's pray that no one died. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Oh, there's the roster. Okay. That's no good. Let me go ahead and forward this to... Okay. Yeah, Alright, oh yeah, the Washington, Ohio serves Baltimore. Yeah, the worst route ever. Speaking of Baltimore. Okay, so, if you notice, the WNO only really has one port on the Atlantic, which is Port Washington, which is down here. Which, as I said, is like the Newport News. It's like Newport News sized. So pretty big, but not like stupidly big. They're like, okay, we need to get to another port. The problem is that it's 1980, and how the heck are we going to do this? So they go via the worst route ever. They're like, well, Baltimore's fairly nearby. So what they end up doing is they end up buying the Canton Railroad, which is a short line in Baltimore that serves the port of Baltimore. Let me show you where the Canton Railroad is. It spawned me in Boston again. Maybe it just wants me to go ride the Mattapan high-speed line. The Canton Railroad is here. Let's go to current, because it's still very much a thing. Yeah, this is the Canton Railroad. It serves Baltimore. So that's what it is. And then there's also the Baltimore and Annapolis, which was an interurban line that served, well, Baltimore and Annapolis and became a bus company, and then the remaining rail line became freight only, operated a couple of diesels, and then slowly got cut back over the years. They're like, okay, well, we can buy the Canton Railroad to access the Port of Baltimore, and then we can buy the Baltimore and Annapolis to, like, I don't know, get some just trackage in the area that we could potentially use for some industrial land. The problem is that this was all built up by this point, so, like, what are you gonna do? But I'd imagine in this alternate timeline, because some of this eventually did end up becoming the MDOT Maryland MTA Baltimore Metro Light Rail Link. Like, well, we still have a railroad here, so why don't we just restore that and, like, run, like, RDCs on it, so... And they access it via, like, a haulage agreement with Conrail up to Baltimore, so... It's the worst thing ever, and it flops, but hey, it's funny. Okay, well, it's 8:58 at this point. I've made my thing. Ugh. I'm not listening to what one of my friends is like, why do you use lowercase? And I'm like, I don't know. Because I think it looks fine. But anyways, I think I'm just gonna end the stream here. Thank you all for watching and enjoying me yap about my fictional railroad for an hour and 20 minutes while getting barely anything done. Thank you, Gam. Thank you, Fig. Thank you, Crimson. Is there anyone I can raid? Do I even really feel like raiding anybody tonight? Not really. I think I'm just gonna go. Alright, well, thank you all for watching. Next scheduled stream will probably be Railroader on this Friday, but, thank you so much, and, yeah, I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.